Salvete discipuli. Today we're going to discuss casus dativus, or the dative case. Now we have already talked very briefly about the dative case, mostly just to get those endings so that we could help remember all of our noun endings and the orders that they appear in. Now in Latin 2, we're going to focus on what the primary uses of the dative case are. And in Latin 2, the dative case is really one of those cases that we keep returning back to and keep expanding our knowledge of. So as just a reminder, our dative endings for first declension, those words that have an AE in the genitive singular, our dative endings are AE and IS. In second declension, those words with an I in the genitive singular, our endings are O and IS. And then in the third declension, those nouns that have an IS in the genitive singular, our dative endings are I and ibus. And of course, as we sing the songs, the dative endings are our third endings down as we go in order of nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative to help you remember and identify which ending you are referring to when you sing those songs. Now for each use of the dative case, you want to take notes on each category and at least one example of each type of dative. Our primary use of the dative case is for an indirect object, and an indirect object is the person or thing to or for whom something is given, said, or done. I'm going to let you pause the video so that you can write down this definition word for word. It is critically important that you know that an indirect object, the dative case, is a person or thing to or for whom something is said, given, or done. To give you a couple of ideas of really what this means to be an indirect object, here are a number of verbs in English that would in Latin take a dative indirect object, because you can say things to someone, you can order something to someone, you can yell to someone, you can promise to someone, you can also then give things over to someone. You can transfer them to someone, you can deliver them to someone, you can also do things to or for a person, so you can show something to someone, you can point out things to another person, and you can build things for a person or buy things or build things for a person. And I see that I have build on here twice, so we're just going to get rid of the second one. All of these words in English and in Latin would use a dative indirect object because it will be indirectly receiving the action of the verb. It's not going to directly receive it like our accusative direct object, but instead that person is somehow connected to the verb's action. Now we have two types of subcategories of indirect objects. Really the only difference is the type of verb that is with that indirect object. Our first subcategory is transitive verbs, and these are the verbs that can take an accusative direct object. For example, nuntius epistulam Cornelio tradet. A messenger hands a letter to Cornelius. Here the nuntius is our subject doing the action of the main verb. The letter is the thing that is being acted upon. It receives the action because it's being handed over. And the person who benefits from that verb is Cornelius, and he is our new dative indirect object. In English, we do also have two separate ways to convey the same idea. We can say the messenger hands a letter to Cornelius, where we use that big key word of to or for to indicate the dative tense. We can also flip-flop our word order and say that a messenger hands Cornelius a letter. Since English is so much more dependent on word order for meaning, even though we don't have the word to or for in this particular sentence, we still know that the thing that the messenger hands over, our accusative direct object, is the letter, and the person that is benefiting from handing over the letter is our dative indirect object, Cornelius. Indirect objects can also appear with intransitive verbs, and remember that these verbs are just the ones that cannot have a direct object in Latin. So for example, you really can't shout anything, so when we say aulus septimo clamavit, Aulus shouted to Septimus. Aulus here is doing the action of clamavit, of shouting, and he's shouting to our dative indirect object, Septimus. We can also find datives with impersonal verbs. And if you remember, we've previously talked about impersonal verbs that will frequently have an infinitive to complete the idea with them. These are those verbs that need to be translated as it, and our primary examples are necessa est and licet, to be necessary, it is necessary, and then it is allowed, licet. And for example, nobis necessa est statim discedere, here our main verb, necessa est, it is necessary, our infinitive to complete that idea, to depart, and here we see a pronoun form in the dative case to indicate for whom it is necessary to depart. We have another example, this time with licet and in the form of a question. So we're working with it is allowed in the question form. Is it allowed, our main verb. Here our infinitive completes what it is allowed for someone to do. And nobis, once again, we have as a pronoun in the dative case, for whom is it allowed to eat here. Now, one thing you'll notice with the dative case, especially as you're reading longer stories that refer back to the same people, is that the dative pronouns are going to appear very frequently as a means to replace the dative nouns that they're talking about. So it's going to be important to recognize the dative cases of these pronouns so that you can correctly identify who this is really referring to. So go ahead and write down both the nominative and the dative of these singular pronouns. In the first person singular, ego, the dative form is mihi, to or for me. In the second person, to becomes tibi, to or for you. And in the third, is, ea, and id becomes ae, to or for him, to or for her, or to or for it. And go ahead and take a moment to write down these translations as well. Quis, our question word who, if we need to ask a question to or for whom, we're going to use the interrogative cui. And if this word appears in the middle of a sentence like qui, our relative pronoun, who or which, it will again be the form cui, to or for whom, except for it'll be in the middle of a sentence to add extra detail. The plural pronouns, on the other hand, in the first person, second person, and third person, nos becomes nobis, vos becomes vobis, and ei, ea becomes eis. Nobis meaning to us, vobis meaning to or for y'all, and eis meaning to them, where the them can be either masculine, feminine, or plural. Our question word qui in the plural who, becomes quibus, to or for whom, referring to multiple people. And if to or for whom needs to appear in the middle of a sentence, it will be the exact same form, but it will not start that sentence and it won't be a question.